Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to episode 8 of Chess Basics, things every chess player should know. Today we're going to wrap up this 4 video series on the Ruy Lopez, and I'm going to talk about what I call the modern line this time. So let's go ahead and put it on the board. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop B5, is Ruy Lopez, A6 Morphy defense. Bishop A4, the main move here, although you can take, that's the exchange variation. And black responds by attacking the pawn in the center, and white castles. And here we have one of those classic positions. Black can take, but usually doesn't, usually plays bishop E7 here. But the new main line goes somewhat differently. The new main line, I can't call it the modern line that I'm calling it here. We'll play B5, and the bishop goes to B3. And then here's the idea. The idea is to put the bishop on C5. So this variation has a bunch of different names. Sometimes it's just called the bishop C5 line. Sometimes it's called the Moeller defense. It's sometimes called the neo-Archangelsk. So I'm just calling it the modern line here, just so I don't confuse anyone else anymore. And I don't know which name it's going to eventually be called. I looked this up in the database, and actually the first time this was played was back in the 19th century in the game Löwenthal against Morphy. So Morphy actually played this way. But this line was out of favor for a long time, and it wasn't until the 1990s that some Russian grandmasters revived it. And what they discovered, first of all, let's talk about the idea of bishop c5. The idea is to get the bishop out to a good diagonal. So it's got this nice aggressive post here, looking on to the white king side. And black wants to play d6 at some point to shore up his center. And it's nice to get the bishop outside the chain onto an active square before playing that move. And so he's taking his chance while he can. In the main line, he puts the bishop on e7. It's blocked in by the pawn after d6 is played. And it's a bit more passive, although it's a more solid defense since it does protect the king against some pins along the e file. So that's the idea, and it was considered a little shaky for a long time. And what these grandmasters showed in the 90s is that actually it's quite playable, and it still continues to be played today at the top level. I was a bit premature in calling it the new modern line, but some people are starting to think of it that way. It's nearly as popular as the main line. So I'm just calling it the modern line. Now, how does white attack this? There's a couple things you need to realize here. There's a couple ways that are not played so much anymore, but you have to be prepared for them if they happen. One thing white can do here is white can just grab that pawn. Another one of those crazy looking moves, but what you realize if you look at this for a second is that the knight's going to take back, and then these two pieces can be forked by the pawn to d4 move. So it's not really sacking a piece if you look at this position again. This is something to remember when you're playing a game. Whenever you put a bishop up here on c4 and you have a bishop on c5 and a pawn on e5, you're subject to this trick. Your opponent can just grab this pawn, and when you take back with a piece, there's going to be a fork here. So it's just something to be aware of whenever you place your piece up here on the 5th row or 4th row from white's point of view. So what happens? You take, white takes, you take back, white plays d4. You might as well grab this pawn, get your pawn back. You're going to lose a piece anyway. And white plays this move, queen d4. And the key idea here for black, the one thing you have to remember, is to play this move d6. And this move does a couple things. First of all, your knight was hanging, so it protects it. And instead of moving the knight, d6 protects the knight, leaves it on a good square, and it makes a threat. And the threat is a very interesting one. And the threat is this move c7 to c5, attacking the queen. And then after the queen moves, you play c5 to c4, trapping this bishop. So this bishop has no squares after it's confronted by this pawn chain, and you're going to win a bishop for a couple of pawns. So that's a serious threat. White has to attend to it. And so while white is doing that, you have a chance as black to complete your development. You can castle and put the bishop over here or out on this diagonal somewhere. And white still has to complete his development. So this leaves black, as long as you remember this move d6, this leaves black in a good shape. So let's go back, see what else white can try after bishop c5. Another idea is just continuing on as you would in a normal closed Ruy Lopez, which is white tries to build up a strong center. And starts with c3 so he can play d4. Black, as I said, wants to play d6. He needs to defend this pawn. Because he knows there's more pressure coming. It was defended by the knight, and the idea is playing a6 and b5 first chases this bishop away so the knight can't get traded. So this knight is solid here defending it, but that was a typo. White is not going to take that pawn there. So black has chased this bishop away from the knight, so the knight is defending it. And he's adding another defender with the pawn because he knows that white is going to play this move with the pawn and try and attack that center. So that's in fact what white does. And at this point, you don't really want to take that pawn. If you take, white will take back. He'll have a very strong center, and you will have almost no presence in the center. That's really called the term for that is surrender the center. And you don't want to surrender the center in this particular case. It gives white pretty good play. So you just drop the bishop back here to b6 where it's protected by the c pawn. And then here is the position where white can try and win something. So if he's going all out for an immediate knockout blow, he might consider this. Pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, knight takes knight, pawn takes knight. Let's see if we can put that much on here. So far it's just been a trade, but what that last thing did was it opened up this line between the queens. So queen takes queen, king takes queen, pulls the king away from the defense of the f7 pawn, and it looks like white has won a pawn. But things are not so simple. First of all, this pawn is kind of loose here, but you can't take it right away. For example, if you play here, the bishop comes back and forks these guys, so that's a bad idea. But what you can do is you can attack the bishop with your rook. And one thing to notice about this position is black has two pieces out and a third that's just moving into an active position. White is going to have to move the same piece again and has no other pieces developed. So you have a feeling that maybe things aren't, even though white has won a pawn, maybe things aren't quite so rosy. And now you look at where can this bishop go. It can't go here or here. Well, I should turn off that feature where it's always moving. There, let's just try ours. Can't go here, can't go here because the knight can grab it. Can't go here because the bishop can grab it. Can't go here because the pawn can grab it. You go all the way back to here, I guess. That's an idea. But the most common move here is actually just to play the bishop to this square. And when the bishop goes back here, you can just take it. And when he takes back, you play bishop b7. And there's no way to defend this pawn in the center. So you're going to get your pawn back. And you have the bishop pair here. So and white still needs to complete his development. And your one downside is your king is a bit vulnerable in the middle. But the queens are off the board, and it's going to take white time to get organized. So you have time to prepare defensively to protect your king, and also to continue to activate your pieces and regain material. So this is actually a good position for black, and no need to be afraid of playing this. So that's nothing to worry about. So here we are. This is the move, bishop c5. This is the what I'm calling the modern line, and so it's an interesting way for black to play. How does white normally go? There's a couple ideas for white here. He can go ahead with this c3 plan and c3 d5, and then just try and maintain the center, not take an exchange and try and win a pawn, but just try and keep the center and play for increased center influence like in a normal Ruy. And he also has this idea of playing a4, which is also occurs in the normal Ruy Lopez, basically going after these weak pawns on the queen side. But Black will sometimes put his rook over here to defend these pawns. And in fact, he needs to. After a4, there's a threat of taking the pawn, and then this pawn is pinned. So usually rook to b8 is played. After d6, this bishop can come out on this diagonal or on this diagonal, and Black can castle. And the game goes on. So this is another way to play the Ruy Lopez. You should all think about trying out sometime. This is the last video I'm doing on the Ruy Lopez in this sequence. I've done 4 in a row on the Ruy Lopez. That's enough for this segment of Chess Basics. I'm going to go back and cover some in-game topics next. Just as a last hint for you guys, I'm going to give you 1 or 2 tips. If you want to avoid some of the crazier lines, instead of castling, if you want to avoid the open Ruy Lopez, you can just play d3 here. And that's okay. This will give you a decent game. It's maybe not as strong for white as playing castles, which is the main move, but it's a playable line. You don't have to worry about all the complications with the open Ruy Lopez. Okay, and then back up. If you go down the main line, and Black castles here, Black is threatening to go into the Marshall Gambit. And if you don't want to face the Marshall Gambit, again, d6 is a simple move you can play here, just protecting this pawn, leaving the square c3 free for your knight to come out. The way the Marshall Gambit works is you play c3, intending to play d4, but momentarily your pieces are blocked in, and Black strikes immediately with d5. And this is a pawn sack because after taking here, this pawn is hanging. But Black gets some quick development. He brings a bishop here and brings his queen out and starts attacking your king pretty fiercely. So if you want to avoid that, then at this stage here, if Black castles right in this position, you can just play d3. And that'll help you avoid that. Okay, so those are the tips. That's everything I have to say about the Ruy Lopez at this point for Chess Basics. There are probably a few variations like the Berlin defense and the Marshall Gambit that are worthy of a more detailed treatment. I'll probably get back to them at some point in Chess Basics, but for now that's going to end my coverage of the Ruy Lopez. I'm going to go on and do some in-game techniques in the next episode. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Leave any comments in the section below, and see you next time. Bye.